Hello, and welcome to the 15th video in my Punishing Graven lore series. Today we'll be going over the third released extra chapter, Firn Night. Previously in Granblue, Grey Raven enjoyed a not very vacation and took a trip to Venus Splash Park where they encountered the Ascendants, who are using the park as a hunting ground to kill Shome, another Ascendant whose research and actions Luna deemed as too heretical for the new world. Due to an encounter with Roland, Kamu made his new debut and eventually got his own frame, being classified as a Transcendent. Grey Raven explores the island and eventually comes face to face with the Ascendants. During the fight with Gabriel, Vera and Cerberus provide support and complete their mission of copying the Ascendants' network model, allowing them to tap into their communications. Commandant retrieved the last samples of Shome's research data, and everyone enjoyed the remaining time on the island. Now Commandant balances out his summertime vacation with a winter wasteland work trip to the ARU. But at least we get some free time with our favorite McDonald's worker. Before the events of the chapter, Simon goes over the situation in the ARU and the strategies for retaking land when the Babylonia reinforcements arrive. At some time before the events of Firn Night, Rosetta is speaking to Nicola about her new frame's completion. That's adorable, she misses her horse legs. And he tells her to use the training room to familiarize herself with the frame's new functions before the mission. At the Ascendant hideout, Gabriel is checking the conditions of the other Ascendants and wonders where Lamia suddenly disappeared to. Changing the topic, Gabriel asks if Roland plans to put Selena out of her misery, and he insists that Selena is a valuable test subject. So no, Roland will not be getting rid of the Selena anytime soon. Back at Venus Splash Park, Nanami speaks to an unnamed machine that is urging her to work on some unknown task, but Nanami refuses, not wanting to hear any of it. The machine continues, telling her that while it has no power to force her, she needs to remember that she has a job to do. Nanami turns away from the machine, saying how she wants to run away from her responsibilities. Picking up with Grey Raven, who are back on Babylonia preparing to go through another round of data collection. We are trying to figure out why Lucia's frame is unable to release its full output when Rosetta steps out of the crowd and approaches us. After exchanging brief greetings, she speaks to Nicola through a headset and says that Commandant will be the last member of her team. She explains that the ARU sent a distress signal, and she is in charge of taking reinforcements, but still needs a Commandant herself, so he agrees to go along.
3 hours later.
While en route to the ARU, the transport craft is shot down, and we crash land with Commandant blacking out. The next time he opens his eyes, Rosetta is locked in combat with a new type of enemy called Bionics. Rosetta manages to repel the attack, and the Bionics retreat. She confirms Commandant's status, and immediately after, the Bionics attack again, having regrouped their forces. After defeating the second wave of enemies, we leave to find the other transport ships that were shot down. While heading to the other crash sites, Rosetta gives an explanation on the current state of things. The virus struggles to spread in remote Arctic environments, so those that live here use most of their combat powers to fight the Tide, which is the local name for the seasonal appearance of these bionic enemies. Usually these tides are dealt with easily, but for some unknown reason, this most recent event is on a whole different scale. While lost in thought, a man and woman appear nearby, and we confirm their identities as Commandant Simon and Construct Atiel. During introductions, Atiel refers to Commandant as Boss, and tells Rosetta that Commandant was top of his graduating class, so now everyone calls him Boss as a sign of respect. We mention that we are searching for the other crashed transports, and Atiel lets us know that they've already recovered the other teams, and takes us to the local command center. After an hour-long ride, we make it to the base, fortified with wall-mounted turrets and warships docked at the port. We meet the commanding officer, a man named Captain Stassen, who gives us details on the ARU situation. He tells us the entire ARU is under the threat of total collapse. 2 months ago, the Bionics appeared and blitzed the coastal zones, taking out most of the ARU supply warehouses and energy pipelines. Stassen brings out a map and highlights the critical zones with the most Bionic activity. We decide to split our forces, as taking a single zone at a time won't do much to the Bionic threat as a whole. But before we head out, Rosetta gets Commandant some protection. Some time later, while we are en route to our operation area, Commandant is struggling to even walk in his bulky mech suit. Rosetta says this to help with the promise of keeping Commandant safe, and a precaution to protect against our almost jinx-like bad luck. Our conversation is interrupted by the screaming of fishermen, who are locked in combat with the Bionics. We rush over to save them, eliminating all the machines and saving the locals. During the fighting, we catch the attention of Diana, who joins us in the battle. After the fight, Diana greets us, thankful for the help, and we catch each other up on the situation. Simon and Atiel connect and let us know that they successfully captured the energy pipeline. And having cleared up our area as well, Simon has us go to a nearby residential district. We arrive to see Atiel playing around with the children, as most of the adults stand guard around the perimeter when we see the familiar face of Evan. Rosetta says her hellos and asks Evan about a device around his neck that he says is a recording of Derek's last song. Diana walks over with one of the fishermen from the port city, and she tells Rosetta that while not everyone is as accepting as the port folk, bit by bit, the residents are forming more positive opinions about the Forest Guard. Simon and Atiel join the discussion, with Atiel limping from damage sustained in battle. We gather around and go over plans for the next assault. Simon, Atiel, and the local guards will protect the rear, while Commandant Rosetta and the Forest Guard will lure the Bionics away from the residential district. Everyone learns their roles, and the Forest Guard gives Rosetta a spare centaur module, so she can charge into battle like before. Excited to have this piece of her old life back, we set off to begin the operation. Rosetta and the other hybrids run throughout the battlefield, eliminating the rampaging Bionics, when one of them speaks in its final moments, promising that Amaria will return. After the battle, Rosetta and the rest of the Forest Guard are shaken up over the mention of someone named Amaria. Commandant asks what that was about, and Rosetta says that Amaria is the sin that destroyed the Forest Guard's reputation and got them labeled as sinners. Knowing she can no longer hide it, Rosetta gives us the complete backstory of the ARU. The ARU was once a prosperous faction in its own right, and during the outbreak of the virus, its remote location left it nearly untouched. When the world government gave out construct technology, the ARU weaponized it, intending on becoming a superpower after the virus had subsided. They created Amaria, a powerful hybrid-type construct that had control over the bionic-type machines produced after her, but upon her activation, she went berserk and razed the ARU to the ground. After intense fighting, Amaria was supposedly killed, and the engineers responsible for her creation were put to death. The family and friends of those engineers, however, were branded as sinners and became what we now know as the Forest Guard. With this new revelation, Rosetta suggests that we head back to camp and tell Captain Stassen about Amaria. We pick up with a secret conversation between two unknown parties, one clearly upset about Ambaria's name being mentioned, and the other saying their control over Amaria isn't complete. Back at the camp, we confront Stassen and ask him about Amaria. He gives an indication that he knows something, and begins to mutter to himself. Atiel loses her temper and grabs him by the collar. Simon manages to calm her down, but the group is slowly losing patience. He relents and admits that Amaria is alive, and that the very first captain all the way down to him have all been sworn to secrecy regarding her existence. He says that at the end of her original rampage, the ARU used some type of code to put Amaria to sleep and sealed her away in the frozen tundra. Stassen copes, saying that she will go back to sleep like she always does, and the bionic tide will retreat, but Simon isn't so sure, as he's confirmed the bionics are stealing energy tanks, meaning they are intending to fully wake Amaria, and if she is, it will become everyone's problem. Stassen says we might find some hints to putting her back to sleep if we search the old research lab used to create the constructs. We make our last-minute preparations before heading to the lab. Rosetta checks over Commandant's polar unit, and Simon goes over all the available information. We reach the front of the lab and see swarms of bionics emptying the building of machinery and equipment. We send Diana and Rosetta in first to check out the inside of the lab, while the rest of us clear out the outer wall. We activate the old road barriers, and after clearing out the bionics, Atiel makes a beeline straight for the facility, and we follow after her. Inside the facility, Simon, Diana, and Atiel begin searching every server for information on Amaria. To pass the time, Commandant picks Rosetta's mind as they wait, since she's unable to work well with computers. She thinks about the lab, and how it's essentially the birthplace of every Forest Guard member, as they were all related to the Amaria incident, except for her, who was modified and became a sinner for different reasons. She thinks about her fights with Alpha, and even their current situation, with them having to fight a construct straight out of Legend. Even thinking about how the ARU residents constantly live in fear of the Forest Guard, thinking that one of them will eventually become the next Amaria, despite every member of the Forest Guard having command chips hard-coded inside them. The conversation ends when Simon calls attention to his findings. We look at Ambaria's diagram and see a black mass for a lower body, and a giant humanoid woman connected to the front. Knowing that even if she didn't go berserk, the mental toll of her new form would have driven her insane. He moves on to the next page, where we discover the code is Derek's voice. Everyone sits in silence when the roar of the bionics outside snaps everyone from their daze, and we speed back to camp. We arrive to find the bionics attacking the base, and are approached by a fanatic Stassen. He asks if we found the code, and we tell him it's Derek's voice. Just like Rosetta when she was infected, the Narwhal's song has the ability to resonate with the minds of hybrid-type constructs. Even though this is the season when Derek would normally return to the ARU, he is running late, likely a malfunction due to Alpha's failed subjugation attempt. That's when we remember Evan has a recording of Derek's voice. We go to find Evan, and before anyone can react, Atiel steals the recorder off of him. We try to stop her, but she manages to slip away, and we all give chase. We track the wounded Atiel from her trail of vital fluid, but her tracks end abruptly, seeming to vanish into thin air. We discover a building entrance hidden in the snow and assume that Atiel went inside, so we go in after her. The entrance leads us to a large underground research facility. We try unlocking all the terminals, but get nowhere, so we decide to look for another way in. Diana and the other forest guard follow in after us and look around the facility, finding a series of production lines that are responsible for producing the ever-increasing number of bionics, when we are greeted by an unfamiliar voice, and Lamia finally makes her formal introduction to the Grey Raven Commandant. We learn that the Ascendants are in the ARU to pick up an unknown something, and that Lamia herself is planning to use Derek's voice to fully wake Amaria. Lamia gets tired of talking and cuts the broadcast as corrupted bionics flood the cavern. The floor of the cavern collapses and drops us into the area below. The trap that went off completely separated the upper and lower layers, with Diana's group on top trying to get down to us. Rosetta tells them to head back and support the front lines while we deal with Amaria and Lamia. Reluctantly, Diana agrees and takes the forest guard and heads out. We head further down and enter an icy cave, encountering more and more bionics. We clear out all of the machines and finally reach the chamber sealing Amaria. We enter the chamber, finding Amaria and Lamia, but no signs of Atiel. When Lamia says that Atiel is here and speaks to Amaria, we are completely blindsided by Amberia's awakening and the fact that she has Atiel's voice. Lamia finally reveals what she was up to, saying that Atiel and her had a deal. Atiel gives her a way to control Amaria without the use of the virus, and she would give Atiel the chance to exact her revenge on the ARU. Atiel asks Rosetta why she would go so far to protect the humans of the ARU, since they were constantly berating and abusing the Forest Guard. Rosetta snaps back and tells her to leave ARU affairs alone, when Atiel reveals that she too is descended from the researchers who created Amaria. She retells her story about how the ARU citizens kidnapped her family and locked them in underground labs, and how she and a small group of others managed to steal a boat and escape, with her being the only survivor. She finally managed to reach the outside world, only to find destruction at the hands of the virus. So she became a construct and worked hard to survive, also that she could get an opportunity to return to the ARU for revenge. After finishing her story, Atiel's mind enters the next stage of integration, and Lamia accelerates this by playing Derek's recording. Rosetta attacks, but the Lamia in front of us is a projection, and Amberia's frame begins to activate. We decide to destroy the energy tanks supplying her with power, hoping to slow down or even halt her awakening. However, we were too late, and Amberia's frame was fully activated, with Atiel's mind melding with Amberia's. Checking back with the base camp, Simon is commanding the Babylonia and ARU joint forces to repel the assaulting bionics. While they can hold off the machines for the time being, eventually the soldiers and constructs will succumb to exhaustion, meaning the overall outcome of the battle depends on Commandant and Rosetta's ability to put down Amaria. Returning to their fight, Atiel is unusually effective at suppressing Rosetta, who suddenly collapses. Rosetta and the other hybrid-type constructs are derivatives of what Amaria is, and therefore her frame has a certain amount of influence over them. She interferes with Rosetta's mind and limits her ability to fight back. Commandant shields Rosetta from the barrage of projectiles while they come up with a new plan. Since Atiel is connected to Rosetta's mind, Commandant can use her as a proxy to reach Amberia's consciousness and use the recorder Rosetta picked up to put Amaria back to sleep. So the two stand up, complete faith in one another, and Commandant starts the connection. When approaching Atiel's mind, the struggle between her and Amaria becomes all the more clear, with the two fighting for control over the frame. Deep inside Atiel's mind, Commandant finds the real Amaria. He tries to ask her to back down peacefully, but she refuses to stop the bionics, and is fully intent on escaping and getting her revenge on the ARU, along with anyone else attempting to stop her. and unfortunately, we qualify as the latter. Back on the outside, Commandant's interference causes the mind integration between Amaria and Atiel to stop, and weakens the grip on Rosetta just enough for her to fight back. Atiel screams out at Rosetta, asking why she would go so far to protect the same ARU that treated her so badly. Rosetta says that even if the ARU is full of past evils, she believes that its people are capable of change, and that at the end of the day it's her home, and she would do anything to give it a better future. They resume their fight, Rosetta dodging between waves of projectiles as she answers with powerful blows from her spear. At the same time, inside Atiel's mind, Commandant is fighting against Ambaria's consciousness, using Derek's song to destabilize their connection. Being attacked on two fronts proves too much for both Amaria and Atiel, who are overcome by Commandant and Rosetta's combined efforts. Seizing an opening, Rosetta throws her spear and it pierces Ambaria's chest. Amaria launches seeker missiles to try and slow Rosetta's movements, but they have little effect as she pushes forward. Amaria screams out in rage, "I'm one step away from becoming free, one step from seeing the world, why must you stop me?" And from her words, Rosetta can tell that neither Amaria or Atiel remain. Instead, their thoughts and emotions have fused together, becoming something new. But their hatred of the ARU remains the same. Rosetta screams back that revenge will only breed more suffering, and she will put an end to the cycle of hatred so the ARU can move towards a better tomorrow. With that, she flies up and unleashes a secret weapon given to her during her time at Babylonia. She inserts her spear into her shield, and having already located Ambaria's core, she takes aim. And gives Amaria, Atiel, neither or both, the only words they've ever wanted to hear. "I'm sorry." She pours the remainder of her energy into the blast as the space is taken by a white light, and Ambaria's core is destroyed. In the aftermath of the battle, the cave around us begins to collapse. We check our conditions, and Rosetta rearms her shield. She turns to Ambaria's remains, giving one last farewell before we rush to the exit. We speed through the cave we used to get here, and find one of the secret exit passageways. So very near to freedom, we are caught off guard when a section of the cave collapses right on top of us. The mech ejects Commandant, and Rosetta drops her weapons to shield him from the debris. Her wings are smashed, and being a construct, she can shield him for a long time, but that does nothing to help our current situation. Rosetta talks about Diana and the others, wondering if they won their fights as well. She drifts from topic to topic, all to keep his mind off the increasing cold. However, that distraction can't work forever, and little by little, more cold air seeps in as oxygen begins to grow thin. Commandant's thoughts get slow and muddled, but Rosetta reassures him, reminding him of her promise to Greyraven. Rosetta throws out one more question, asking if Commandant wants to know why she picked him over everyone else. She says that no matter what happens to Greyraven, their heads are held high, and that strength is something she was envious of, the strength to press onward. Our conversation is interrupted by the sounds of digging and shouting. Captain Stason saw the explosion from earlier, and on Simon's request sent out a rescue party. They eventually clear the entire exit, giving us a path to freedom. The remaining bionics are standing around since they can no longer receive Ambaria's orders. And as the Force Guard takes the chance to reinforce the defenses, we reach the top of the makeshift elevator, where we are greeted by the morning sun.
気をつけて。私に寄りかかって。そしたら今度は私が先導するから。
We pick up with Nanami, laughing like an absolute madman in the middle of the frozen forest. She is trying to communicate with a lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, bionic bear. Eventually the bear has enough and tells her to stop laughing at him. This was arguably a worse decision, as now she knows the bionic can communicate with her. She tries to nickname the bear Tedio, and he swiftly corrects her, saying his name is Martin. Nanami apparently got lost here, and isn't even sure where here is. Martin explains to her that she is in the ARU, and what the ARU actually is. And when she asks what his purpose for being here is, he says his job is to shoot down enemy aircraft. And Nanami agrees to help, with her logic being she's only shooting down the aircraft, not hurting the people on board. They assemble the anti-air laser and shoot down several aircraft. Nanami leaves for a moment to check the crews and make sure everyone is alright before returning to Martin. Nanami asks Martin what's next, and he is confused as he cannot receive any orders from Amaria. Martin says that all bionics have independent wills, but they also have special receivers that can pick up on Amaria's thoughts, feelings, and commands. And the last one he received was shooting down the aircraft. He tells Nanami that he was just mindlessly fighting until his receiver broke, and now he doesn't know what to do. Nanami learns from Martin that the bionics and ARU are at war, and comes up with the genius plan to just convince Amaria to stop attacking. But she has no idea where Amaria is, and Martin is no help at the moment. So knowing there's little to work with means she has to do everything the hard way, by knocking each receiver off the bionics one by one, so they can all come to their senses like Martin. Martin feels like Nanami's goal is impossible at worst, and unrealistic at best, but it would be a net positive for everyone if she actually managed to pull it off. Which is why Martin, stuck with the curse of boredom, agrees to guide her to groups of bionics. They reach a settlement in the Outer Rim, with the local bionics gathering energy tanks. Martin offers to bring Nanami to the bionics overseeing the area, when she jumps from the cover and speeds ahead. Before anyone can react, she smashes a corrupted that was hiding in the shadows. The bionics stare at the black mechanical remains as more corrupted emerge from the sea, and Nanami, together with the bionics' help, work together to defeat the invading corrupted. After the battle, some of the bionics sink to the floor in relief, while others turn their attention to Nanami. One bionic screams in anger over not being able to hear Ambaria's voice anymore. Other bionics join in, saying that without commands they can't fight effectively. Martin asks if they still intend to fight even if they have their free will back, and they confirm that they want to, as they share the same anger that Amaria does. They question Martin, who believes that fighting will do no good for either side, and agrees with Nanami's plan. The other bionics correct Nanami, saying that while they can feel what Amaria feels, they fight for her of their own free will. One bionic gives Nanami the backstory of Ambaria's creation, with the added detail that the worst part of her conversion was that she was not in control of her own body. Instead, she was controlled by the ARU higher-ups. The bionic says they will continue to fight even if they can no longer hear Ambaria's voice, since they believe she deserves to be free. After the angry bear took his supporters and left, Nanami sat in silence until Martin snapped her out of her daze. While the angry bionics are in danger of running into the corrupted, she decides to continue with her original plan instead of chasing after them. She gathers the bionics who stayed and asks them if they know Ambaria's location. They tell her that they stayed because they are tired of the endless fighting, although they still feel the same anger inside as the bionics who left. But if Amaria tells them to stop fighting, they will, so Nanami plans to ask Amaria directly. The bionics form a ring to discuss Nanami's plan and eventually push Martin out. They give Ambaria's location to the pair and they head off. They fight their way through the guards, and Martin informs Nanami that Amaria just sent all available bionics to attack the human camp. Nanami and her group head back to the camp to try and put a stop to the fighting. While Martin panics, Nanami looks around the battlefield, having noticed something odd about some of the figures in the crowd. A bionic slams a fisherman on the ground, but hesitates to deal the final blow, when another bionic interrupts and kills the man. Nanami is able to recognize they are corrupted in the bionic ranks, likely sent to instigate the conflict, while the mastermind hides in the shadows and watches. Nanami rushes into the fray, shooting across the battlefield and defeating all the corrupted in her path. Seeing the commotion, Simon orders all nearby units to get out of her way, to keep them from becoming collateral. Stacen tries to argue the decision, saying pulling back will leave the front lines weakened, when thankfully Diana and the Forest Guard arrive to reinforce the gaps left behind. She tells Stacen that Commandant and Rosetta stayed behind to deal with Amaria and has the Forest Guard spread out and rescue injured ARU soldiers. Back with Nanami and Martin, they keep moving further and further away from the battlefield, and Nanami says she's catching the trail of someone trying to sneak away, likely the one behind this whole mess. Nanami speeds ahead, chasing after Lamia as Martin deals with the corrupted getting in her way. She finally reaches Lamia and questions her about her motives, with Lamia saying that the entire incident serves as no more than entertainment.
Hello?
Whatever you do, do not let Alakar leave that room under any circumstance.
Actually, he just left. He said he was going for a walk.
No!
Suddenly, they see a massive explosion in the distance, and knowing that was likely Amaria, Lamia retreats, having lost her main objective. With Lamia's retreat, the corrupted begin to fall back as well, but the war is far from over, as they were just a simple spark to light the fire. Martin and the others did all they can, but now they are powerless to help and stare at the chaos happening before them. When the explosion happened, it was accompanied by a voice that rang out over all available channels. "I'm sorry," the voice says, halting the ARU and Bionics alike. Nanami steps between the two factions and tells the Bionics to trust in Amberia's last words and end the fighting. Hearing the name Amaria, the ARU citizens begin to talk when Stacen steps forward and comes clean. He explains to everyone how Amaria was sealed underground and caused the tides. He demands that the war come to an end, tears streaming down his face. The same happens to many others throughout the human and Bionic sides, possibly a result of the guilt of Amberia's suffering coming to light. Her last words, "thank you," that echo throughout the Bionic ranks, or maybe some combination of the two. Martin's words move the once angry bear leader to tears, and underneath the stars, humans, constructs, and Bionics alike cry over the past. Nanami steps forward to comfort the bear, holding him as his anger is washed away. As the sun rises the next day, Nanami leads the Bionics who choose not to stay in the ARU, vowing to deliver them their promised wonderland. Alright, cool. That wraps up Firn Night. Quite a bit happened, actually. So, first we have the second mention of Plume's frame, like, not operating at the level it's supposed to. So that's... And I know Hassan and Nicola know, because they were talking about it in Grand Blue, so that's definitely going to come back. That's probably going to come back later. Oh, and one last thing. This is Nanami's actual last line of the chapter. I just had no place to put it in the script. You know, super sketchy stuff to end the chapter on. But keeping with the Nanami topic, her being the one to shoot us out the sky is actually insane behavior. But at the same time, she's literally always where she needs to be. So as goofy as she is super clutch when the story requires it. What else? Another thing about her is the before chapter section, where like apparently she's got this like mission that she has to do. Something. I don't know. Who knows? Nanami knows. We got Rosetta. Rosetta was top tier this chapter. Learning about how she like thinks and how she's now able to protect the people of the ARU after getting over her stuff from Frozen Darkness. Great. At first, I didn't like the whole sinner thing coming back, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Because Frozen Darkness was only like a 24-hour period at the longest. I think it was even less than that. So it makes sense that not everyone in the ARU suddenly had their switch flip and, you know, is thinking, oh, well, the Forest Guard are cool now. So they had to take this chapter with the big issue that was affecting, you know, the entire area to, you know, show everybody that, hey, the Forest Guard's actually pretty cool. Let's air this information out and prove that the Forest Guard are not actually, you know, traitors to everybody. The Amaria and Atiel thing, them kind of fighting for control of the frame and then like fusing into a new personality, I thought that was pretty nice. Jumping in and out of her mind during the fight was great design. And then like finding out the whole incident is basically Lamia just going for a walk is hilarious to me. In the other Ascendants, there's Roland, who still has Selena. I like how they throw that in. They're just like, hey, remember guys, Selena is still here suffering. So hopefully they'll do something with her in the future. And lastly, I tried something new with the big fight, so like let me know if you like it or not. I was watching a Maxor video and decided to try the whole cut up style instead of just silence and then the 5-minute gameplay. So yeah, just let me know how you feel about that. Yeah, that's about it. I gotta start thinking about chapter 13, how I'm gonna do that one. I really don't want to make just like one super long, hour-long video. One, because I feel like it's harder to justify sitting down for an hour to watch it. And two, because it'll take me forever to make. And it will just be like a huge gap in between the posts, and I don't want to leave another gap like the most recent one. I'm definitely leaning towards a two-part thing, especially since the two halves of chapter 13 are very different story-wise. But like, whatever. I'll think about it. I'll figure it out later. Anyway, that wraps up my thoughts. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next video, where we cover the 4th released extra chapter, EX3 Lost Chapter.